Well, good morning, everyone. After a brief hiatus, the three amigos, consulting amigos, are going to begin anew. And today, Ed's going to help us looking at an issue that is, as a small business, is really important in the event there is a catastrophe of some sort. He's going to be talking to us about the benefits and the value of buy-sell agreements to make sure that your business can move forward in spite of a catastrophe. So with that, Ed, help us understand how buy-sell agreements can help an organization not only survive, but thrive.
Well, thank you, Ray, for the introduction. As you know, we talk about topics that build value and reduce risk. Today, we're going to talk about buy-sell agreements, and it's a topic that reduces risk in an organization. And as you well know, I have a lot of experience in buy-sell agreements. I've seen all the problems that can develop and have to be dealt with by not having an effective buy-sell agreement with a client that took 5 years to get the ownership transferred over after and 7 figures of expenses.
Wow.
So that taught me a lot. And I'm working with 2 different clients right now. I have 2 different engagements where we're updating their buy-sell agreements. And I'm finding it to be a very engaging subject with the owners. They like it, they want to be protected, and they know very little about it. So it's an opportunity for consultants to really add value to a family business. So let's get started. We're talking about ownership transitions, and we're talking about buy-sell agreements and specifically. And what is a buy-sell agreement? Well, it's a plan for partnership changes. And that's it pretty much right on the nose. So it affects a lot of different types of businesses. You have expected changes in partners, and you have unexpected changes in partnerships. So here's the challenge. Think about it this way. Next day you go to work, one of your partners no longer there. How are you going to continue running the business? First of all, you're not going to have a partner that was a key player in the business there to help you. But now you've got to transfer his shares to the remaining partnership. And that means you got to deal with his family. And that can be very challenging. So the best time to negotiate a buy-sell agreement is now, when the partners are in the business, acting in the business and getting along and moving things forward. And without taking aside a buy-sell, they can just decide how they want the ownership of the business to be transferred based upon certain conditions. And so they agree on process, they agree on the valuation, and they agree on payment. Those are the 3 important parts that have to be agreed upon. One of the things that's really important in a buy-sell agreement is the first right of refusal. And that's how to admit new partners and exit existing partners. And it's a fair way of doing it. Basically, you find somebody that wants to buy the business if you're one of the partners in the business. And then you go back to your remaining partners and you ask them if they're willing to give you the same amount of money or the company. And if they don't, you can sell it to whoever you want to sell it to at that price. It's a fair way of adding and exiting a partner. So take special attention to that. And then you come into how is business valued, and here's where we run into a lot of pushback. It's hard to value a business when you don't understand valuation techniques and you think you know how to value a business. So you talk to your neighbor down the street and he tells you your company is worth such and such. That isn't an accepted way of valuing a business. And I would think, and we talk about this many, many times, very few business owners understand what their company is actually worth. So to do that, you have to have a valuation method that's accepted. And there's 3: the income approach, the market approach, the asset approach. It has to be consistent with IRS fair market value definition in their revenue ruling 5960. which was developed a long time ago and the IRS is still using. And I think you need to assign this responsibility to your CFO, because he's the best person that's suited in your organization to figure this out and move the company forward. So
would that include a CEO who's also a partner, or a CFO who's a partner?
Yeah, that would include anybody who's got that type of training. You need that type of training to do evaluation.
I guess the reason that I raise that is because if you're a partner of a company, you're no longer detached from what that valuation is, and that person may choose to pick, one of the three, which is the better one, without sort of remaining neutral. It feels to me like at least setting up the methodology should be done by an outside, non-involved person.
No, I disagree. I think it should be done by the partners. The partners.
I'm not suggesting that they're not involved in it. I'm suggesting that, most CFOs I've known don't know how to do this.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. That's a valid point. So you have to bring somebody in who's got CFO experience. And quite frankly, most companies that are operating don't have a CFO.
Right.
Which means they have to bring one in that has that expertise.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point.
And I think that's an excellent point, because controllers just don't have this type of education.
I have a client who's grown very dramatically. They've got about 160 employees today, and they've only had one CFO one time. Didn't turn out to be that great accountant, but not really a CFO. And so, but they do have a really super and unusually competent accounting firm who acts sort of as the CFO. By the way, it's about the only one I've ever known where that's possible. Accounting firms, CPAs, do not typically understand that function. But anyway, go ahead.
I think I was going to add, I think one of the things that you bring, Ed, that's really dramatically different than most we see is that you do have the expertise. And I think for many of the small businesses, without having an outsider who can play that role of the CFO, they're not going to be able to do it. As Ron said, they just don't have the expertise. They don't even know what has to be done. So I think we're in agreement with you is that this needs to be done, but I think they have to find outside help to make it happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Those are very good points. Moving along, beware of the arbitration clauses. This means that if you pass away and then all of a sudden they're going to go to arbitrators outside of the company that know nothing about the company, that don't agree on the methodology method. And this is where you incur large bills, outside bills, and very little progress on getting the stock transferred over to the remaining ownership.
It sounds like a good deal for the arbiters.
Oh, it is. You mean you get one side gets one, the other side gets another, and then if they don't agree, which they won't agree, then you get a third party. And at the 5-year exercise that I went through, they could not get an agreement no matter how many arbitrators they brought in. And the more arbitrators they brought in, the worse it got.
Wow.
But, it's a standard clause in these agreements. And the law firm that wrote the one that I was dealing with for 5 years is still using that same verbiage for other clients. And that's because they just don't understand the problems that can happen by having that clause in, because it sounds good.
Right.
We get an arbitrator in and they figure it out and then we move forward. It's not that easy, because we have two sides, one side selling, one side buying, and they don't think the price is the same.
Yeah.
And the terms. So they're way off, and it's hard to bring them together. And then when you don't know what type of valuation method you're going to use, then you get into all the problems of these valuation methods. And these valuation methods are very complex. And if you don't agree on the assumptions, you're not going to go anywhere. So I really believe that the ownership needs to understand enough to agree on the assumptions and on the valuation method, and they should be doing it every year.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of getting ahead of my presentation here, but that's kind of where I'm going with this conversation. And I think it has to be signed every year, and I think it has to be signed by the partners as well as the spouses. And probably one of the most important parts that many times is left out is money. The money. Where's the money going to come from to make this transfer happen?
Yeah, that's always the issue. You can, 5 years ago you agreed that this is the valuation, but your circumstances are a little different, and there's no way that you can meet that commitment now.
Yeah, and to your point, Ed, nobody's looked at it in 5 years. We're asking them to really examine this, and basically it's just an afterthought. So 5 years goes by now, and the valuation is way off.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
So here's some of the challenges of buy-sell agreements. First of all, it's more of a checklist item. Do you have a buy-sell agreement? Yes, I do. No, I don't. If you don't have one, get one.
Yeah.
Without any real understanding of what should be in the buy-sell agreement, and make sure there's agreement with the partners on that, so that when you do have a problem down the road, you're protected. So what ends up happening, so you say, okay, I have one, and you put it on the shelf. You don't look at it for 20 years. And the situation I'm talking about exactly was 20 years.
Wow.
And then you find out how much has changed. Oh, the insurance lapsed. It was too expensive.
Yeah.
No, we never did a valuation. We never agreed on a valuation. So all these things come up as problems at a time of grief. Typically when you lose a partner, it's a major change to the company, and you're trying to figure out how to keep the company going, and you don't have that person's expertise anymore, and now you're dealing with a family.
Yeah.
So it becomes very challenging. And people that have one, to say they have one but don't know what's in it, that's a false sense of security.
Right.
You either use it or lose it.
Right.
If you're not using it, you better start, because it could end up costing the company a lot of time, a lot of money, and could cost the company going out of business.
Yeah.
We talked about life insurances lapsing, becoming too expensive. You may lose funding. What good is that if you need to make a transfer and you don't have the money? That isn't going to work either.
If I can cite an example, I've had a 10-year level term policy. It changed this month, and I just went from $186 to $460.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I can see how, and you're aware, Ed, that can happen inside of a business, and then finally they just say, I'm not doing it. But then they leave themselves exposed.
As we said, there's no agreed upon method for setting value. You don't want to rely upon outsiders that don't know anything about the business, can't agree on the valuation method and assumptions. These arbitrators, these legal experts in this area are very expensive. To solve the problem that I was involved with, we ended up paying for an appraisal, and we paid the guy $1,000 an hour to do it.
Oh my God.
He was the foremost expert in the United States on doing them. And it's the only way we brought it to a head. He was very good. He was, nobody could challenge him. And so therefore we could move the process forward. That's a big investment. Who charges $1,000 an hour? And I can honestly say he was worth every penny we spent. We should have spent the money with him up front. We would have saved a lot of money and a lot of time.
Well, you don't really think about it. And so often small business people and others get into this sort of like cost per hour kind of thing. It's like, oh no, I mean, I can't afford that. I only pay my regular attorney, $250 or $300 or whatever. I can't pay you that. Well, it depends on the circumstance, because if you're talking about a business that's been successful and you've got 30 to 100 employees, you're talking about tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars difference in the outcome on this stuff, not to mention possibly driving the business out of business. So $1,000 is pretty relative when an hour. I mean, assuming he's not going to spend 1,000 hours, but I mean, there's some place where it makes sense. And you have to really look at the total cost compared to the total benefit. And in a way, I mean, if you're stuck doing this, $1,000 an hour, it's like, sorry, that's the penalty stroke for you being not very smart.
Well said.
Yes.
There is a real upside to doing one of these the right way, and that is to build in your contingency planning. And I did this with a client that really came out really well, where he wanted to start getting his son involved in the business, and then trying to take care of others in the business so that when he was gone, everything would continue to move forward. We built that into the buy-sell agreement, and it really was a real positive experience for everybody in the rooms. That was something that really was something unexpected to me, that kind of a response would come out of doing a buy-sell agreement. I never anticipated that.
Well, and I think one of the other things this speaks to, Ed, is you've been saying so often how important the strategic plan is, and all this is part of the strategic plan. So again, kudos to you, because I think this is really where it all begins.
The other challenges we hinted about, and it can be really, really challenging, and that is the family interference. Because the longer it goes on, the more the family gets involved, the more they want a certain amount of money, then they want to exert control on running the company. And it could be a real challenge to keep the company in business. So that's why another reason why buy-sell is really important.
And I don't know if I'm exactly right. Put me back on track, Ed, if this is a little off. But if you happen to have a partner die and he has a family that has been set up in a trust, that stock automatically is now owned by the trust. And if say the wife or say say husband and wife are both killed, now you've got a 21, 22-year-old son who's the administrator of the estate. And the thought was, well, Johnny here is just going to distribute assets. But now you've got a situation where the assets are already owned by the estate. Without a buy-sell, I don't know if if that happened before you had the buy-sell done, you're now dealing with the estate and potentially, an egghead kind of person who has no business experience, no business degree, is immature at that age, and really has no idea what to do. And they're going to naturally gravitate to where the money is. A lot of times, small businesses is where all the money is. And so this guy, this son, is going, wait a minute, I own this business now. So I mean, it does happen. I think that's the thing, is it does happen. We all have examples of crazy things like this that have actually happened.
I couldn't have said it better. I really appreciate that amplification. That's the big risk of not having a good, effective buy-sell agreement.
Yeah.
Valuation issues like we talked about, can cripple the company. Many owners don't know what their the value of their business and how to value it. And it can't be based upon opinions of their neighbor's opinion. It's got to be based upon some type of a method of coming up with value. And valuations can be extremely emotional. So the last meeting I was in, the CEO got so upset about talking about valuations because his position was, his idea of what the company is worth is more relevant than anything somebody doing a valuation could come up with. And this is a very good CEO who is very well under control, but he just lost it. It's emotional. And I've seen it in action, and now it's kind of funny because now we always refer to that situation when we talk about valuations. We're going to end up doing a valuation, but we had to go through a process, and he had to express his opinions, and it's not an exact science. He's absolutely right, but somewhere down the road, the IRS is going to ask you how you value the business, so you have to have a method. So you have to agree on that, and these methods are very complicated, and there's a lot of assumptions. So for them to be very effective, it's really important that the partnerships agree on all of the assumptions that are made to generate these numbers. Because if the partnership agrees on the assumptions, they're going to agree on the valuation of the business. But when you start bringing outsiders in, they're gonna try to come up with these assumptions, but they're not going to be as good as the assumptions made by the people that own the business.
So Ed, I just kind of want to clarify, are you saying that even if there is an amicable agreement and people leave with X amount of dollars and it's like everything is okay, that you still have the potential, at least, of the IRS coming in and saying, well, how did you do this because of tax implications?
Well, it's primarily estate planning, and it doesn't impact most of us because I think the limitation before you pay gift tax and estate tax is like $12 million. Most businesses are under that amount.
Yeah, right. Okay.
When you get over that amount, then you get the IRS involved, and you have to follow their rules and regulations.
Okay, so yeah, wow.
So you might have one partner that's in that position and the other partners that aren't, so it becomes complicated.
Yeah, right.
So
I can see where you could have an owner who might be the the angel or something like that, and may have high assets, and the company isn't worth as much, but you still have an issue where this particular individual has got an estate that's higher than that, and it affects maybe 3 or 4 or 5 companies that he's got ownership of.
Yeah.
Wow, there's something I thought about.
2 weeks ago, I was in a law firm, and we were going over a buy-sell agreement for one of my clients. And the attorney mentioned to me that he's got several families in the same situation, trying to figure out how to value their business. And the problem is, if you get an outsider to come in, they're going to charge you $30,000 and up to do one of these valuations. And remember, a valuation is only good for a point in time that they do it. So that's a lot of money. And what ends up happening, the attorney said, is that they don't want to talk about it. It stops all progress from moving forward because of that price tag.
Yeah.
And I think my position to him was, let's set them up on an evaluation model. Let's get them to agree on it. They need some help from an outside CFO, but it's going to be at 10% of the cost of doing one from the outside.
Yeah.
And it'll keep things moving forward, and they'll end up having an effective buy-sell agreement. And as you would imagine, most owners don't understand valuation approaches, assumptions, and numbers. They're more focused on their accounting reports from last month rather than looking 5 years in the future. And I'm going to give you an example here why it's really important to agree on these assumptions. When we had the 5-year problem of one of my clients, it all came down to income taxes. And S corporations don't pay income tax, but we all know we pay income tax. So to value the business, there's a big controversy in valuation right now, whether there's an income tax rate or not. And obviously, if you don't have an income tax rate, your valuation of your company is way overstated. So you have to, again, that's got to be one of the assumptions that all the partners agree on. We will have an income tax rate. It's going to be 30%, and we're going to build that into the model. Yeah, but these are all the steps that you have to take when you bring in outside people, trying to get them to agree on, 3 different people to agree on anything is almost impossible. When you got this conflict between buying and selling. And I think the next slide, what do you need to do now? And wrapping this thing up, review your buy-sell agreement with your partners. Get it out, take it off the shelf and review it. Pay attention to that first right of refusal. Is it going to be acceptable for the partners for admitting or exiting partners? Here's a really good one. Try to limit ownership to those adding value to the business. It's not a good thing to be bringing in partners that aren't going to add any value. And I really
Does this include spouses? I mean, how do you handle spouses who may not have any understanding at all what the business takes?
You keep them out of the business.
Okay.
You don't have your spouses in the business. That's why they signed the buy-sell agreement, because the bottom line is, if the 3 of us were in partnership and Ray unexpectedly passed away, and then all of a sudden your wife's one of our owners, she knows nothing about business. She's a great person, but for adding value to the business, it doesn't work.
Right.
It's going to cause a lot of problems with Ray and I possibly on how to run the business.
Right.
So that's really important that you limit ownership to the people actually adding value.
I would throw out for larger businesses that are trying to grow and really do something big, and they're out looking for investors. Of course, when an investor comes in, they've got the legal teams, they know what to do. But even so, I can see circumstances where ownership could be a money person, and just suggest that in a case like that, you don't always have to have people who are adding value to the business personally, but I guess you could say in that case they're adding their money, and that's obviously value to the business. So did that fall under your statement there? I guess it does.
Yeah, I think it does. And,
okay. Yeah,
and usually they add some other perspective that's useful to the business
as well, right?
Yeah, so you're not getting a business student automatically as a partner in a business who knows nothing about a business and has nothing to contribute to a business.
Yeah.
So I do think it's an important concept to try to adhere to try to limit conflict down the road. We talked about agreeing on an accepted valuation method. We talked about preparing it annually with the advice from an outside CFO. Agree on the assumptions as a group. Don't rely upon a stranger to tell you about your business. Incorporate succession planning, gifting and selling of shares as part of this process. Update annually, spouses and partners. And when you go through this with one of your clients, you're going to find it to be a very positive experience. They're going to love you for what value you bring into the company, because they don't spend time looking at these types of things, and it brings everything together. And then and as a last point, you include it as part of your legal corporate file. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important, guys, and I'm surprised there isn't more conversation about this. Apparently, most people are lucky they don't have the 5-year nightmare that I experienced, and learned a lot about buy-sell agreements, which I knew nothing about at the time when I first started the process. But what you want to do is, as usual, is try to keep it out of legal process. You want to have everything pretty much agreed upon while you're still alive, so that when things change down the road, everything's handled according to what your plan was.
Well, I can say that having started 7 businesses and I guess closed or sold I guess 4 of them. I've seen it go both ways. Fortunately, I've been maybe a little bit luckier than some. I had a buy-sell agreement for my very first business, which gave me, I guess, first right of refusal. It's not exactly right. I just had the option. It was an option to buy out 2 of the other partners. I had to buy them both out at the same time. And then, of course, we had to have some agreement as to what it was worth at that point. So, but at least the buy-sell made it clear that that I had an option to do that. So when I decided to exercise that option, 3 years or so into the business, we had been very successful, grown very, very fast, and because we had the buy-sell, they were a little bit surprised because they liked the business, we were making money, etc. But at least it had been broached before. Had I tried to broach that subject with them without it having been in the buy-sell, it would have been terribly depressing to them. They would have taken it personally as I don't view you as partners, which was not the case at all. In this particular case, I wanted to grow the business faster, and I didn't want them to be at risk because I knew that by comparison, they would see what I was doing as somewhat reckless. And they were older. They didn't need that risk. They wouldn't have had time to recover had we gone south, and I did. And so it worked out really well. And we simply agreed, in an afternoon on what a price was. I was very generous. I wrote them a check, and that was that. In another case, there's a little manufacturing operation, and we were doing fine, but we didn't have a lot of excess capital to fund it to grow as rapidly as we might have liked. And, things change. It was a fashion business. Things do change. And there were just 2 of us, and it was sort of easy because we weren't talking about a lot of money. We had equipment to sell. The other guy was the partner that did all of the manufacturing, and I was the one that did basically responsible for selling and reps and stuff like that. And so we just agreed that I took a little bit of money, and then he got all the rest. He just sold it out, and we were done. And we've remained friends all these years, and he always wanted to be a sound operator for like giant systems, and he got a job, and that's what he wanted to do. It worked out fine. But then in another case, there were about 6 or 7 partners, and we only had a nominal kind of agreement on how things would work. And we were not doing well at the time. And the other partners decided they wanted me out because they thought I was making too much money. And I agreed to do that based on being able to keep my own accounts and that kind of thing. It worked out just fine for me, actually. It was great for me. As it turned out, they ran this business into the ground. And because I was no longer involved, well, I shouldn't say that. It was because I wasn't involved, they ran into the ground. But they ran into the ground and ended up personally owing payroll taxes.
Wow.
Which was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, which it took years for them to pay off. One of them never really did recover financially, and I was in a way lucky. I had enough clients to be able to restart my consulting practice very quickly. And the only catch was, and here this is because we didn't have a good agreement. The only catch was I had signed for a lot of furniture and fixtures and stuff like that. And so when they went belly up, guess who got to pay for all of that? And so while I got out just fine at the time, I ended up with a bill that I had to pay, which I was very well aware that was my obligation, and I sat down with the bank and we worked it out. Unfortunately, it wasn't a huge amount of money. Because it had been mostly paid down. So, I mean, there were, in parting, I've had pretty good success. But even so, you can see things can come back to bite you.
Yeah.
And should have had some kind of a written statement about my guarantee on the business that would have relieved me from that. But it got past me. So in the kinds of problems too that you're talking about can really be messy and cause divorce and just hard feelings. It can be, and there were hard feelings in that last case. It did not work out well. Some people thought I abandoned the company, and other people thought I needed to get out. And so it didn't turn out well. And I realized that I would never do that again. Never bring in so many partners, even though each and every one of them were bringing tools to the game. But what I was able to do is after they went out of business, I was able to replicate that business and hire everybody, and I simply paid them instead of having them as partners. Wow, what a nice situation that was. No partners. So anyway, I've been there, and I can say for a fact that having a buy-sell and a good plan and thinking through all of the obstacles ahead of time really makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. And